A question I sometimes get asked is how best to lighten the colour of wood. So I've got my hands on a few products, and in this video I'll be trying them out with the aim of finding out which one is the best and most natural looking. And I'll try one of them out on this very orange pine chest of drawers. I have here a nice piece of pine, and I chose this board to experiment with for a few reasons. There are many different varieties of pine, but I think this could be Douglas fir, which is one of the better quality, harder and more dense varieties with tighter growth rings, the type of board you'd be likely to see used in pine furniture. Secondly, this has an aged look to it. What I mean by that is it's quite dark in colour. I have given it a light sanding just to clean it up a little, but basically there are two common reasons why pine furniture tends to darken. One is exposure to UV or ultraviolet light, as sunlight reacts with lignin, which is a natural component in wood cell walls, which causes oxidization. That makes it darken and yellows the surface, which most people consider to be undesirable. Leave it long enough and it'll basically turn orange. And two, if the pine has had any type of oil-based finish applied to it, which by the way this board hasn't, this is bare timber with no finish applied, but applying oil-based finishes to pine also darkens and yellows the wood, which is why I always tend to prefer water-based or acrylic finishes or some clear wax finishes on pine. I say some because some of them are truly non-darkening, whereas others claim to be clear but they are not, and I'll leave some more information and links to those products in the description of this video if you'd like to find out more. Links to all of the products that I'll be using in this video can be found in the description box below. The first product is by Liberon and it's called a wood bleacher. This is probably the product that I have the highest hopes for, but I've never used it before, so I don't really know what to expect. On the bottle it says that it lightens naturally dark or damaged wood. The next product is also by Liberon and it's called a liming wax, described on the tin as a white wax used to create a limed effect on oak and other interior hardwoods. Obviously pine isn't a hardwood, but let's see how this one looks. And I've just noticed on the tin that it says that it should be applied with steel wool. So I'm just going to go over it now with some steel wool. That has toned down the colour quite nicely. Next I have some white wood dye, also by Liberon. This has been in my cupboard for a few years now, but I'm hoping it still works as it should. Unfortunately, it looks like I forgot to move the camera here. So here's some footage I recorded after, on the other side of the same board, just so you can see what it looks like going on. And finally, this is the Osmo Polyx Oil. Now, I mentioned earlier in the video that oil-based finishes will turn pine yellow, but this product, known as Raw Transparent, apparently has a white pigment in it designed to counteract that yellowing. So let's give this one a try. With hard wax oil products, usually I like to apply them with a brush. Usually takes between 1 and 2 days for it to fully dry. Then I'll denib it with some 400 grit wet and dry paper and apply a second coat. It seemed like a shame not to expand this experiment to some other types of timber. So here I've got a nice piece of hardwood. This is beech. This is another timber that doesn't look particularly nice when it yellows. Then I've got a nice piece of American white oak. And I thought this would be interesting because it has an open grain. So it'll be interesting to see whether those finishes actually get inside the grain and how that looks. And then a nice piece of Iroko, because I thought, why not try it on a darker wood? So we'll see how that looks. It's been a few days and I'm back now just to see how things are looking, and I've noticed that the wood bleacher product doesn't seem to have had much of an effect, if any. So I'm going to reapply a second, maybe even a third coat and see what that does. I'm also going to give the hard wax oil samples a denib and a second coat, and when applying by brush, it's important to keep the coat as thin as possible. Before we check out the results, just like we don't want things interfering with the natural colour of our timber, we also don't want things interfering with the pure taste of our water. And you can strip away the impurities with a Waterdrop filter. We've had the Waterdrop K19 filter for over 6 months now, and it provides the clearest and smoothest tasting water. The machine requires no plumbing. You just fill up the tank, plug in the machine, and you are good to go. I happen to live in an area of the UK that has some of the hardest water, and the Waterdrop K19 model that I have here not only filters the water using reverse osmosis, a water purification process that removes ions, molecules, and larger particles, but it also provides hot water within 1 second at the touch of a button. There are 4 temperature settings: room temperature, 45 degrees, which is perfect for baby formula, plus 85 and 95 degrees, which are great for hot drinks like tea and coffee, or one of your favourite noodle snacks. And there are 5 capacity settings in millilitres, which you can use for various sizes of cups and bottles. But Waterdrop makes a wide range of other machines, including under-counter plumbed-in solutions, cold water dispensers, and under-sink filters too. But the star of the show is the filter itself, which is easily interchangeable and can last up to 12 months depending on usage frequency, and the machine lets you know when a new filter is required. If you'd like to prioritise drinking water health and get an exclusive 21% discount off the K19, use the code RAGANDBONE, available until December the 1st. It would make for an excellent lasting and health-conscious gift this holiday season. Now, back to the workshop. Starting with the wood bleacher product, which by the way I applied 3 coats of in the end. It has barely lightened the timber at all, to be honest. It does look very natural though, but because it's a penetrating treatment rather than a wood finish, it's not going to offer any durability, which means you're going to have to add another finish over the top of it. So yeah, disappointed by the wood bleacher. Maybe it's more suited to removing stains rather than actually lightening the colour. Moving on to the liming wax, this has lightened the pine the most. It looks pretty natural, however, I have noticed some pigtail marks. I hadn't realised that this board had been sanded with a random orbit sander, but it must have been at some point in its life. And that wax is basically sitting in those pigtail marks, bringing attention to them. And because this is a wax finish, it is going to offer some durability, but not much. Moving on to the white wood dye, and this has lightened the wood almost as much as that liming wax. But what's most interesting is that I didn't think this one would look natural. However, I think it looks more natural than the liming wax. Because it's a water-based dye, it can also be diluted, meaning that you could make that whitening effect less prominent. I like the way that it's made those dark knots more subtle, but because this is a dye and not a wood finish, if more durability is required, then it will need a top coat. I'd recommend either a water or acrylic-based varnish or a clear wax. And finally, the Osmo Polyx Raw Transparent. This one surprised me too, because I thought this product was designed to retain the natural colour of the wood. I didn't necessarily expect it to lighten the wood, but it has. Not as much as the wax or the dye. Does it look natural? Not particularly to my eye. I think maybe after I'd brushed it on, I probably should have wiped away the excess. That would have removed some of the pigment, but I think it would have made it look more natural. This one, however, is going to be the most durable out of all of them. I wouldn't personally use this on pine though, because after checking the product information, there are no UV inhibitors in this product, and because that lightening effect is so subtle, the pine is still going to yellow and darken with age. So I don't think this product does enough to counteract that. Now, I'll just quickly run through the other types of timber because there are some interesting results here. On the beach, the bleacher was similarly ineffective. The wax just looks weird for some reason. The dye, however, once again looks really good, I think. And the hard wax oil, once again, I wish I'd have wiped away the excess here. Now onto the Iroko, and the wood bleacher seems to have lightened this more than it did with the lighter coloured woods. I really don't like the way that the wax looks, mainly because Iroko has an open grain, so you can see all of that white pigment sitting in the grain. Some people might like that look, but it's not for me. Once again, that wood dye though looks pretty good. The hard wax oil does not look good on the Iroko. On the American white oak, the wood bleacher has actually lightened the wood much more than it did on the pine and the beech for some reason, and it actually looks really good. The wax though does not look good. I also don't like how the dye looks on the oak. I guess part of me just thinks, why would you ever want to change the colour of American white oak anyway? And unsurprisingly, I don't like the way that the hard wax oil looks on it either. So just to try out the Osmo product, but this time applied really thinly to both the pine and the oak, I'm using a scouring pad to apply another 2 coats. And as expected, it looks nice, much more natural, but much less pigment. So to summarise, the wood bleacher product isn't something that I would recommend, however it did work quite well on the American white oak. The liming wax works great on closed grained timber, but it doesn't look natural on open grained timber. The wax does give more of a whitewashy kind of a look, and be careful when sanding to remove any pigtail marks because the wax will highlight those. The white palette wood dye is my personal favourite here, particularly on woods like pine. As I mentioned, it can be diluted as well. You could even mix it with water-based varnish so that it's a pigment and a finish all in one application. And I think it looks the most natural on both open and closed grain timbers. The Osmo Polyx Raw Transparent I would definitely use if I needed a durable finish, but I just don't think it offers a long-term solution to darkening, and I wouldn't use it on pine. Now, showing samples on planks of wood may not necessarily demonstrate the products in the best way, so I've bought an old chest of drawers which is pretty orange, and I want to try to lighten the colour. This is actually a really nice quality chest of drawers. Tongue and groove drawer bottoms and back panel, dovetail drawers, and all of the pine is really thick and chunky. This was a bargain for 15 quid. And I would have liked to have used the palette wood dye because this was my favourite from this experiment, but unfortunately it's empty now. So I'm going to use the liming wax instead. And I'm going to take some photos using manual settings so that you can truly get an idea of how this looks before and after. I have some of this wax and polish remover which I'll apply with wire wool to help remove any dirt, grease or old waxes that might have been applied to this over the years. And then straight on with the liming wax, first applying liberally and then wiping away the excess because I'm aiming just to lighten the colour rather than create a whitewash kind of a look. And this took a surprising amount of elbow grease. And the finished result looks okay. The orange has well and truly been tamed. Looking back at these photos though, I think it could probably do with one last rub down with wire wool when my right arm recovers, as it is a bit blotchy in places. I think I would have got better results with the wood dye, but here it is. Now, anyone need a chest of drawers? Thank you for watching.